Genius triplets call the CEO Dad at the wedding. The grandma smiles, but the mother is shocked. The grand hall shimmered under golden lights, cascading like falling stars above the guests. Murmurs filled the air, blending with soft music until the towering doors burst open. Silence fell as three small figures appeared, their identical features glowing with innocence. With fearless steps, they ran down the aisle, drawing every gaze. No one could imagine that their voices were about to rewrite a family's fate. Alejandro Mendoza, the young and cold CEO, stood firm at the altar, exuding authority. He was a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms, silencing rivals, and dictating futures with a glance. Yet at that instant, something in him faltered. The children raised their trembling little hands toward him. With voices unshaken, they shouted in unison a word that echoed endlessly. "Daddy!" The word struck like lightning. Guests froze mid-sip, glasses crashing to the floor, conversations severed in disbelief. Even the orchestra faltered, notes dying mid-air. Alejandro's jaw clenched, his cold gaze darkening. But deep within, something fragile cracked open, an emotion he thought long buried. The titan of power had been disarmed by innocence. In the front row, Carmen, his grandmother, covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Tears slid down her wrinkled cheeks, but her smile radiated warmth. She had prayed for this moment for years. The moment truth could no longer be hidden. To her, the word "daddy" was not scandal, it was redemption, a gift from fate itself. But not everyone shared her joy. Teresa, Alejandro's mother, elegant in her icy perfection, recoiled in horror. Her painted lips trembled, hand pressed tightly against her chest. To her, those children were not a blessing, but a threat. She would never accept them, never allow an outsider to taint the Mendoza bloodline. Valentina, the children's mother, stood frozen like stone. Her chest rose and fell with short, panicked breaths. Tears welled in her eyes, not of shame, but of fear. For years she had guarded the truth, sacrificing her peace to protect her children. Now, that secret was torn away, revealed by the purity of three innocent voices. The room erupted in whispers, sharp and cruel. "Daddy! Did they just say daddy?" Guests traded glances of shock, others sneering with malicious delight. Scandal rippled through the crowd, cutting like blades. Carmen's tender joy contrasted sharply with Teresa's wounded pride, their expressions framing the battlefield that had suddenly formed. Alejandro opened his mouth, but no sound escaped. His throat constricted, words dying unspoken. His eyes locked onto Valentina's across the room, and in that moment the silence screamed louder than any accusation. Their shared past burned between them, a history of love and betrayal. Alejandro knew nothing would ever be the same. The children, unaware of the storm they had unleashed, ran to him. They wrapped their tiny arms around his leg, clinging with unshakable faith. It was not learned behavior, it was instinct. Blood recognizing blood. The hall held its breath, waiting for his decision. Would he embrace them or deny them before all? Carmen closed her eyes, whispering a prayer. She knew this was no mere scandal. It was a crack in the walls Alejandro had built around his heart. Redemption was knocking, sacrifice, demanding payment. Will he pay the price? She thought, clutching her rosary with trembling hope. The future hinged on this fragile instant. Then came the sound of scraping marble. Teresa stood abruptly, her chair shrieking behind her. Her heels struck the floor like thunder as her voice sliced the silence. "This is unacceptable," she declared, her fury poisoning the air. But even her power could not extinguish the spark ignited by three innocent hearts. As tension thickened, a narrator's voice seemed to rise above it all. A truth buried for years is breaking free. A powerful family, a forbidden love, and three children who may change everything. What secret does this family hide? Stay, for what comes next will shake every soul within these walls. Alejandro Mendoza was no ordinary man. From a young age, he learned that power was forged through discipline, sacrifice, and the ability to mask pain. At only 32, he had risen to become the most respected CEO in Madrid. He commanded a fortune envied by many, yet bore a loneliness few could endure. His presence alone carried weight. Tailored suits framed his tall frame, luxury cars lined his garages, and calendars filled with meetings dictated his life. His gaze, cold and piercing, was enough to silence opposition. To the world, he was unshakable, a monarch of modern business, but behind that facade, scars lingered. Once, Alejandro had loved with reckless abandon. Valentina had been the woman who tore down his walls, filling his nights with laughter and dreams of a future untainted by duty. Yet pride, misunderstanding, and the crushing weight of family expectations ripped her away. In her absence, he vowed never to feel again. Nights haunted him the most. When the city lights dimmed and skyscrapers grew silent, he faced his reflection in glass. There, ghosts whispered, reminding him of the warmth he had lost. The echo of Valentina's laughter lingered, cruel in its absence. Success filled his pockets, but emptiness consumed his soul. His mother, Teresa, had molded him into the ruthless figure he had become. "Love distracts, love destroys," she would repeat, her words drilling into his conscience. Desperate for her approval, Alejandro hardened himself, convincing his heart that love was weakness. Yet no armor was strong enough to silence memories. Despite his denials, he longed for genuine tenderness. The empire he built was a throne of glass, admired, envied, but fragile beneath the weight of isolation. Each victory rang hollow, each accolade a reminder of what he lacked. He was king of his world, but prisoner of his pride. To his employees, Alejandro was brilliance incarnate. Every order was followed without question. Every decision was law. He embodied success, untouchable and invincible. Yet behind the impenetrable mask, pride chained him tighter than any prison. He had become a captive of the very image he worked to protect. In secret, Valentina's memory burned like an ember he could not extinguish. He carried her name silently, hidden behind champagne smiles and shallow conversations. No headline or corporate triumph could erase the wound. His heart beat not for wealth, but for a love he believed lost forever. Loneliness became his constant shadow. He preferred endless hours in his office over returning to the cold emptiness of his penthouse. Spreadsheets and contracts dulled his thoughts, but the silence between midnight walls crushed him. Behind closed doors, he was not a CEO, only a man abandoned by love. To the public eye, Alejandro was perfection, a self-made icon, a symbol of discipline. But those who dared look closer could glimpse the shadows in his eyes. Regret clung to him like smoke. Mistakes that could not be undone, choices that cut deeper than knives. His pain was his most guarded secret. Yet destiny is cruel and patient. Though Alejandro believed his life was set, fate had other designs. He had spent years burying feelings under layers of steel, but truth has a way of rising, no matter how deep it is buried, and his reckoning was already on its way. For the truth would not arrive in boardrooms or financial reports. It would come in the form of three small voices, carrying innocence and certainty, voices strong enough to break through walls of pride, voices destined to dismantle the empire he built on sacrifice, leaving only the man beneath. Valentina Ramirez was not like other women. Her dark eyes held the strength of someone who had learned to survive in a world that punished weakness. Raising 3 children alone had carved resilience into her soul. Every scar she carried told a story of battles fought in silence. She was proof that love could endure pain. From the moment she discovered life growing within her, she made her choice. She would remain silent. The truth of the children's father became her secret burden. It was not cowardice. It was sacrifice. She chose to shield her babies from a family that would never welcome them. In secrecy, she found her strength. Her days were filled with quiet sacrifices, long hours of work, hands worn from labor, body heavy with fatigue. Yet every time she saw Diego, Isabella, and Mateo smile, her exhaustion melted away. For them, she became both mother and father, protector and guide. They were her reason for breathing, but questions always came. "Where is our father?" the children asked with innocent eyes. Valentina's heart trembled each time, inventing stories to shield them. She painted fairy tales of distant heroes, hiding the painful truth. She feared the day honesty would shatter their world. That day, she knew, was inevitable. Her love story with Alejandro had been fire and tenderness. He was the man who once made her believe in forever. But his pride, his family's cruelty, and society's cold judgment tore them apart. Left alone, she chose not to hate, but to protect. Her love became her silence, her shield. Valentina's world was small but full of warmth. Their modest apartment smelled of homemade meals, walls decorated with crayon drawings. Laughter filled the air more often than tears. She believed wealth meant nothing without love, and in her home, love was the only treasure her children ever needed. Still, the truth haunted her. Every time she saw the children play, she saw Alejandro in them. The way Diego arched his brows, Isabella's mischievous grin, Mateo's calm eyes. Blood spoke louder than silence. And she knew one day, no matter how she tried, the truth would demand to be revealed. Society was harsh with her. Whispers followed wherever she went. A single mother. How shameful. Yet she walked with her head high, dignity as her armor. Her faith became her compass, guiding her through storms. Life had been cruel, but she trusted destiny still held a purpose she could not see. The children's brilliance frightened her. They noticed too much, questioned too deeply. Diego's curiosity, Isabella's sensitivity, Mateo's quiet wisdom. They were reflections of a man they had never known. They asked questions she could not answer. Their instincts were leading them closer to the truth she feared most. At night, when silence embraced the apartment, Valentina cried alone, not for herself, but for her children. She feared rejection from a father too proud to embrace them. Between sobs, she whispered apologies. "Forgive me, my loves. Everything I do for you." Her prayers rose into the darkness. What Valentina didn't know was that destiny had already set the stage. Her sacrifices, her tears, her silence, all of it was about to be tested. The truth she had buried was moving toward the surface, and once exposed, it would change not only her life, but the lives of everyone around her. For children are the most dangerous keepers of secrets. With their innocence and honesty, they open doors adults spend years trying to keep shut, and soon Diego, Isabella, and Mateo would unknowingly pull Alejandro back into her world. The past she feared was no longer behind her. It was coming. Fate often weaves its threads with irony, and that evening was no exception. Alejandro attended a charity gala hosted by his company, a dazzling affair crowded with journalists, executives, and dignitaries. Cameras flashed as crystal chandeliers lit the room in splendor. He moved through the crowd like royalty, untouchable, admired, feared. Yet destiny had other plans. Among the staff working in the background, Valentina appeared. She had been hired to assist with logistics, her hands arranging flowers and glasses. She wore no jewels, no expensive gown, but her natural grace made her shine brighter than gold. She had come to work, not to be seen, yet she was impossible to ignore. Alejandro froze mid-step when his gaze landed on her. The noise of the gala dimmed, as if the world itself had held its breath. There she stood, hair tied back, eyes shadowed with exhaustion, beauty untouched by years apart. Memories surged like wildfire. For Alejandro, it was as though time had never passed. Valentina felt his stare, and her body trembled. The tray in her hands nearly slipped, betraying her calm exterior. She hadn't expected him, Not here, not tonight. His presence reopened wounds she had buried under years of silence. The air thickened, heavy with unspoken words and ghosts of what once was. Alejandro wanted to turn away. His pride screamed for him to retreat, to pretend she was invisible. But something deeper pulled him closer, stronger than logic, stronger than fear. Each step felt like defiance against the walls he had built around himself. His heart, long imprisoned, began to rebel. Their eyes met across the room. The moment lasted seconds, but it was enough to unleash a storm. In her eyes, Alejandro saw tenderness buried beneath pain. In his, Valentina saw power laced with emptiness. Neither spoke, but their silence revealed more than words ever could. The past had returned. Then laughter rang out, high, pure, unmistakably familiar. The children, who had quietly followed their mother, dashed between the tables. Their giggles filled the hall, catching curious glances. Alejandro's chest tightened as he studied them. Something about their energy, their smiles, their very presence struck him with eerie recognition. From across the hall, Carmen watched everything. Her seasoned eyes saw more than others dared. The glance between Alejandro and Valentina, the innocent laughter of the children, it all painted a truth she no longer needed, confirmed. Her lips curved into a wise smile. The bloodline was undeniable. But Teresa also noticed. Her face hardened instantly, every wrinkle sharpened by contempt. Valentina's presence was a ghost she thought buried forever. Now, seeing her near Alejandro, her heart filled with dread and rage. She recognized danger, not in scandal, but in the possibility of losing control over her son. Valentina longed to flee, to disappear before everything collapsed, but her children betrayed her intentions, running to embrace her at the exact moment Alejandro stood closest. The sight froze the room, a mother, 3 children, and the man who could not look away. The silence burned with truths unsaid. Alejandro tried to speak, but his throat betrayed him. Valentina lowered her gaze, fighting back tears. Their world had collided once again, and neither could escape. Around them whispers spread like wildfire, speculation blooming faster than denial. In that moment, Alejandro realized his empire was no shield against destiny. The gala carried on, music resuming, glasses clinking, laughter forced. But for Alejandro and Valentina, the night had marked a turning point. The flame they thought extinguished flickered again, fragile yet undeniable. Destiny had drawn them back together, and no matter how they resisted, this was only the beginning. Diego, Isabella, and Mateo were no ordinary children. While others their age lost themselves in games, they observed quietly, their eyes sharper than most adults. They noticed glances, silences, and details invisible to others. Their innocence did not cloud their perception, it sharpened it. They saw truths hidden beneath words. That night, after the gala, their minds buzzed with questions. In the small apartment, they gathered around their mother. "Mom, why did that man look at us like he knew us?" Isabella asked, her voice carrying a mix of wonder and suspicion. Valentina forced a smile, but her trembling hands betrayed her calm. Diego, ever the restless one, imitated Alejandro's serious expression, making his siblings laugh, yet the laughter carried unease. "It wasn't a normal look," he insisted. "It was like he recognized us." His dramatics masked an intuition sharper than his years. Behind the playfulness, he too felt the pull of truth. Isabella, always sensitive, added softly, "It felt like he wanted to say something without words." Mateo, the quietest of the 3, stayed silent, but his thoughtful eyes revealed agreement. Their innocent theories brushed against a reality too complex for their age. Yet instinct had already planted the seed. Valentina's heart pounded as she listened. For years, she had hidden the truth behind fairy tales and gentle distractions. Now it was her own children pushing against the wall she built. She wanted to protect them, but she knew she could not silence curiosity forever. Their questions were daggers. They began inventing stories to make sense of their suspicions. Diego imagined Alejandro as a superhero in disguise. Isabella thought of him as a prince, cursed by a wicked queen. But Mateo, rational and calm, whispered the most dangerous possibility. What if he really is our dad? Silence answered for Valentina. From that day, their game turned into investigation. They clipped pictures of Alejandro from magazines, watched him on news broadcasts, studied his gestures. They compared his smile to their own, his eyes to theirs. For them, it was exciting, innocent play. But each discovery led them closer to an undeniable truth. Carmen saw their growing curiosity with quiet pride. Each time she visited, she marveled at their sharp questions and clever observations. To her, the children were more than just blood. They were hope. She knew that their innocent persistence might achieve what adults' pride could not, break Alejandro's chains. One afternoon, Isabella approached Alejandro unexpectedly during a chance encounter. With the blunt honesty of a child, she asked, "Why do I feel like I know you?" The question struck him harder than any accusation. For a moment, the impenetrable CEO faltered, his eyes flickering with a spark, long dead. Valentina tried to shield them, drowning them in homework, games, and stories. But the children had already made a secret pact. They would find a way to bring Alejandro closer to their mother. To them, love was simple. Families belonged together. They saw no shame, no scandal, only belonging. Each day, their innocence became a force stronger than fear. Every smile, every question they threw at Alejandro pulled him closer to the truth. They didn't understand pride, reputation, or social chains. What they understood was love, and their hearts told them Alejandro was part of theirs. While adults wrestled with shame and silence, the children carried truth in their small hands. They did not whisper or scheme, they simply lived it. And soon, their unshakable instinct would unravel secrets years in the making. For when truth belongs to children, no power on earth can bury it. Carmen Mendoza had always been the quiet soul of the family. Unlike her daughter Teresa, who worshipped power and appearances, Carmen believed true greatness was measured in love. Years had weathered her body, but her eyes held wisdom carved by loss and resilience. She saw truths where others chose blindness. The first time she met the triplets, her heart knew. She did not need documents or DNA tests. Their smiles carried Alejandro's mark. Their laughter echoed a rhythm she had once heard from her grandson. "Blood cannot be hidden," she whispered to herself, embracing them as though destiny had gifted her a miracle. Gentle yet firm, Carmen became their secret ally. With them, she was not the matriarch of a cold dynasty, but a loving grandmother. She listened to their stories, joined in their games, and offered patience where the world offered judgment. In her arms, the children found the tenderness their lives often lacked. The day Isabella called her grandma for the first time, Carmen's eyes filled with tears. That single word restored something she thought lost forever. It was not just affection, it was belonging. In that moment, she promised herself that nothing, not even Teresa's iron pride, would sever the bond she now cherished. She kept the truth close to her heart, waiting for the right time. Carmen knew Alejandro was imprisoned by pride, shackled by fear of scandal. But she also believed he still carried love, buried under the weight of expectations. Patiently, she prayed and planned, trusting that the right moment would come. Teresa noticed her affection with disdain. "Don't let that woman manipulate you, Mother," she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. Carmen only smiled softly. "This is not manipulation, Teresa," she replied. "This is truth." But her daughter's obsession with appearances left no room for such wisdom. When alone with the children, Carmen told them stories of courage, forgiveness, and love that defied appearances. Each tale carried hidden lessons, preparing them for the storm ahead. "Love always wins," she would say, "even if it takes time." The triplets listened with wide eyes, their spirits nourished by her hope. She marveled at their uniqueness. Diego's daring questions, Isabella's sensitive heart, Mateo's quiet wisdom. Old souls in small bodies, she thought, admiring them with pride. To her, they were more than grandchildren. They were destiny's answer to a family drowning in pride. They were the light that would guide Alejandro. From the shadows, she watched Alejandro bury himself in work, his heart frozen. Her heart ached for him, for the boy who once laughed freely, now a man shackled by fear. He must open his heart before it is too late, she whispered, her faith resting on the children's innocent persistence. Valentina, wary at first, grew to trust Carmen's kindness. Slowly, the two women became allies, bound by love for the children. Carmen's presence gave Valentina the strength she lacked, a silent reminder that she was not alone. In Carmen, Valentina found the motherly embrace she had always longed for. Carmen's body weakened with age, her health declining, but her resolve only grew. She did not fear death. She feared leaving behind a family torn by lies. She wanted to live long enough to see Alejandro embrace his truth, to see the triplets claimed openly. That dream became her final mission. Thus, Carmen became the bridge between two broken worlds. With patience, love, and quiet strength, she prepared the way for Alejandro's redemption. For in her eyes, the story had already begun to change. Destiny was moving, and she knew, sooner or later, the truth would blaze through the darkness. Teresa Mendoza had built her life around one unshakable principle. The Mendoza name must remain flawless above all else. Reputation was her crown, appearances her shield. Love, to her, was nothing but a distraction. For Teresa, power and legacy outweighed tenderness, and she guarded them with iron hands. From the very first moment she laid eyes on the triplets, Teresa's heart recoiled. They were innocent, yes, but to her they embodied shame. They represented a stain on the dynasty she had sacrificed everything to protect. To acknowledge them was to admit weakness, and Teresa had no room for weakness. Each time Carmen smiled at the children, Teresa's scorn deepened. "You're blind, mother," she hissed, her tone sharp as glass. "Don't let that woman ruin everything we've built." Carmen's patient reply, "What's built on pride always falls," only fueled her anger. Teresa could not accept a truth so threatening. Suspicion became her obsession. She followed Valentina's every move, interpreting kindness as strategy, humility as manipulation. In Teresa's mind, Valentina was nothing more than an opportunist seeking wealth and power. The more Valentina stayed silent, the more Teresa believed she hid cunning motives behind her gentle eyes. At social gatherings, Teresa's poison spread like wildfire. "Have you noticed how she insists on being near Alejandro?" she whispered to her circle, planting seeds of doubt. Rumors traveled swiftly, painting Valentina as an intruder. Each word was a dagger, cutting into the dignity of a mother who asked for nothing. Alejandro suffered under her constant pressure. "You must marry someone worthy," Teresa demanded, repeating her mantra at every opportunity. She paraded potential brides before him, women of wealth and pedigree. To her, love was irrelevant. Bloodlines mattered more. But each word chained Alejandro further to a life of emptiness. Valentina bore Teresa's disdain with dignity, though her heart ached at every insult. She never retaliated. "I will not lower myself," she whispered through tears. Pride had already destroyed too much. Responding with bitterness would only add more fuel to Teresa's fire. Silence became her armor against cruelty. The children, though young, felt Teresa's coldness. Isabella once asked, "Why does that lady look at us like we did something wrong?" Valentina embraced her tightly, shielding her from explanations too cruel for her ears. But deep inside, Valentina vowed never to let Teresa's poison reach their innocence. Carmen, caught between daughter and grandson, watched the divide grow. She understood Teresa's hostility came not only from pride, but from fear. Teresa feared losing control, feared love breaking the dynasty's illusion. Yet Carmen also knew that Teresa's pride would one day cost her the very family she sought to protect. At a family dinner, Teresa's fury finally erupted. Slamming her hand on the table, she shouted, "Those children are not part of us." Silence suffocated the room. Alejandro sat frozen, his chest tightening as her words cut deep. For the first time, defiance sparked in his eyes against his mother. "Enough, mother," he said, his voice steady though his hands trembled. Teresa's shock was palpable, her son's rebellion piercing her pride. Years of unquestioned obedience crumbled in an instant. For Teresa, it was betrayal. For Alejandro, it was the first step toward breaking free from her suffocating chains. But Teresa would not surrender. If anything, her anger grew fiercer. She swore to tear apart any bond between Alejandro and Valentina, no matter the cost. What she did not realize was that her fury was forging the very love she despised, making it stronger with every act of resistance. The night of the charity gala carried a tension that clung to the air like smoke. Crystal chandeliers gleamed above, violins played in the background, and guests exchanged shallow smiles. Yet beneath the glamour, unease simmered. Alejandro stood among politicians and executives, his posture rigid, his spirit unsettled. Something was coming. Valentina had tried to avoid the event, but fate gave her no choice. Wearing a modest dress, she moved discreetly through the hall, her children holding her hands. Teresa's gaze stabbed her from across the room, every glance a dagger. Valentina knew she was walking into a storm, but kept her head high. From her seat, Carmen observed with quiet anticipation. Years had taught her to recognize when destiny was about to strike. She clutched the crucifix around her neck and whispered, "Tonight, masks will fall." Her heart pounded with hope and dread, knowing the truth was poised to surface at last. The spark came from an unexpected voice. A guest, emboldened by wine and gossip, raised his glass and laughed loudly. "Isn't it strange how those children resemble Señor Mendoza?" His careless words sliced through the air. A ripple of gasps swept across the room. Whispers spread like fire across dry fields. Teresa rose instantly, her fury boiling over. "Enough of this nonsense!" she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. But her outburst only sharpened curiosity. Dozens of eyes turned toward Valentina and the triplets, demanding answers. Silence became unbearable. The walls seemed to close in on Alejandro, pressing him toward the truth. His gaze fell upon the children, and denial crumbled. Diego's mischievous eyebrows, Isabella's radiant smile, Mateo's calm demeanor, they were reflections of himself. His heart thundered. He could no longer dismiss what blood screamed louder than words. For the first time, the mask of the untouchable CEO began to break. Valentina clutched her children tightly, tears blurring her vision. She had carried the secret for years, protecting them from shame. Now, innocence had betrayed her. Exposed before everyone, she felt powerless. Yet she refused to bow her head. Her love for her children was stronger than humiliation. Confusion clouded the triplets' eyes. Isabella tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, why are they looking at us like that?" Valentina kissed her forehead instead of answering, her silence more revealing than words. Around them, judgmental stares cut deep, but the children's purity remained untouched. Carmen stood slowly, her presence commanding quiet. With a voice both tender and firm, she declared, "These children need no proof, no papers. They are of our blood. Only pride blinds those who refuse to see." Her words struck like thunder, dividing the hall between loyalty to pride and loyalty to truth. Teresa lunged to contradict her, but Alejandro raised his hand. "Mother, stop," he whispered hoarsely. His voice carried the weight of decades, trembling yet resolute. The room fell silent. His eyes, wet with suppressed emotion, revealed more than his words. He was no longer hiding. He was standing at the edge of revelation. Valentina's world spun. This was the moment she feared most, the collapse of the life she had built. The sacrifice, the dignity, the silence, it all felt shattered. Yet, in the midst of despair, she clung to her children's warmth. For them, she would face any storm, even this one. And in that breathless silence, Alejandro realized there was no turning back. The whispers, the judgment, the fury, it all faded against the pounding of his heart. He was standing on the brink of a decision that would either destroy him or finally set him free. The storm had only just begun. The tension in the hall could be cut with a knife. Alejandro stood in the center, caught between two worlds, his mother Teresa, eyes burning with fury, and Valentina clutching the children with trembling strength. The silence pressed in on him, demanding a choice. His heart thundered, louder than the murmurs. For years, he had been the unshakable CEO, the cold man feared by rivals, but now he was simply a son, a lover, and perhaps a father. The mask of power no longer fit. His chest rose and fell with violent breaths, his pride crumbling. For the first time in years, he felt human. Teresa shattered the silence. Her voice, sharp and venomous, cut the air. Alejandro, choose. Your family, or that woman and her children. Every syllable dripped with contempt, her demand echoing through marble walls. Guests gasped, waiting for his response. To her, it was unthinkable he would defy her. Valentina said nothing. She held the children tightly, her silence louder than any plea. Her tears fell quietly, yet her dignity remained intact. She would not beg. She would not lower herself. Her strength came not from pride, but from love, and in that moment she became a fortress of silence. Carmen stepped forward, her voice steady and calm. Alejandro, she whispered firmly, blood never lies. Those children are your reflection. They are your second chance. Do not let pride rob you again. Her words resonated deeply, shaking the chains he had worn for so long. His grandmother's faith was unshakable. Around them, the audience leaned in as if watching a play, each heartbeat echoing with suspense. Some whispered of scandal, others of shame, but a few saw hope in the innocence of the children. They did not understand power or legacy. They only wanted a father's embrace. The room held its breath. Diego, the boldest of the three, suddenly broke free from Valentina's arms. He ran to Alejandro and grabbed his hand. With eyes full of courage, he asked, "Daddy, why won't you tell the truth?" His voice rang pure, devastating, undeniable. Every whisper died. Silence returned, heavier than before. Isabella and Mateo followed, wrapping themselves around Alejandro's legs. Their arms clung tightly, their faces filled with trust. Innocence demanded recognition. Alejandro felt his soul fracture under the weight of their embrace. Tears stung his eyes. For the first time in years, the impenetrable man was undone by love. Teresa screamed, her fury uncontained. "This is a lie, a disgrace. I will not let you destroy our name." Her words ricocheted through the hall, but they no longer held the same authority. No one turned to her. Every eye remained fixed on Alejandro, waiting for him to break his silence. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Memories flooded him, Valentina's laughter, their nights together, the moment he lost her. The fortress of pride he had built came crashing down. He realized he had been a prisoner, not of duty, but of fear. His heart ached for freedom, for truth. Opening his eyes, he looked first at Teresa, then at Valentina, then at the children. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Mother." Teresa's face lit with expectation, certain he would side with her. But what came next was not obedience. It was rebellion, born of love. A truth, long silenced, was ready to break free. For Alejandro knew this was the breaking point. There would be no return after this night. The empire of appearances and fear was collapsing. In its place stood a choice, between the chains of pride or the liberation of love. And as the room leaned closer, waiting, his next words would change everything. Alejandro inhaled deeply, steadying his trembling hands. The weight of silence bore down on him as hundreds of eyes pierced his soul. Then with a voice firm but laden with emotion he spoke, "They are my children." Gasps rippled across the hall, some in disbelief, others in awe. The unshakable CEO had broken. Teresa froze, her painted lips quivering, her eyes wide with shock. Years of control shattered in an instant. Her son had chosen love over legacy, truth over appearances. She clutched her pearls with shaking fingers, her fury simmering beneath humiliation. For Teresa, it was betrayal. For Alejandro, it was liberation. Valentina staggered, her knees weakening. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her heart swelled with relief. For years she had borne the burden of silence, carrying the truth alone. Now Alejandro had shattered the wall she built to protect them. He had claimed the children openly, in front of the world. The triplets erupted with joy. "We knew it!" Diego shouted, bouncing with triumph. Isabella's smile glowed with innocent pride, while Mateo whispered softly, "We were waiting for you." Their words pierced Alejandro's chest like arrows of redemption. The children had never doubted what he had spent years denying. Alejandro knelt before them, breaking every rule of his polished image. Tears streamed down his face, unhidden for the first time. He wrapped the children in his arms, holding them tightly. The man of stone crumbled into flesh and blood. Pride had collapsed, replaced by the raw power of love. Carmen's eyes glistened with joy. Her trembling hands pressed together in prayer as her lips whispered, "Love always wins." To her, this moment was more than redemption. It was the answer to years of silent prayers. She had lived long enough to see the truth triumph over lies. Teresa tried to speak, her voice cracking with rage. This is a disgrace," she spat, but her words fell flat. No one looked at her. The audience had already shifted, their gazes fixed on Alejandro and his family. The applause of a few broke the silence, then grew into thunder. Alejandro turned toward Valentina, extending his hand. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Forgive me." The weight of years hung between them, pain, betrayal, and sacrifice. Valentina's sobs choked her, but her eyes spoke louder than words. She took his hand, and together they wept for the time they had lost. The hall erupted in clapping. What began as scandal had transformed into a testament of courage. Alejandro's vulnerability had struck a chord in every soul present. The audience no longer saw a cold CEO. They saw a man brave enough to love, even at the cost of reputation. The children clung to him, refusing to let go, as though afraid he might vanish again. Alejandro stroked their hair, whispering silent promises only they could hear. He vowed never to abandon them again. The years of absence would not return, for his heart now beat with a new purpose. Carmen smiled through her tears, watching the family she had longed for finally take form. Her legacy would not be money or power, but love restored in a house once ruled by pride. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but the foundation was laid. Truth had finally been spoken, and though Teresa's eyes still burned with fury, Alejandro stood tall. His choice had been made, and there was no going back. The Mendoza Empire would never be the same. But in that moment, Alejandro no longer cared, for he had gained something far greater than power. He had gained his family. The ceremony was no longer the same. What had begun as a polished social event had turned into the stage for a revelation. Alejandro, Valentina, and the triplets stood together at the center, embraced under the watchful eyes of Carmen. A broken family was reborn before the crowd, bound by truth. Carmen rose slowly, leaning on her cane, her step steady despite her age. She placed her trembling hands on Alejandro and Valentina's shoulders. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "This is what I always dreamed of, seeing you united, seeing you strong. Don't let anyone tear this apart again." The children laughed, spinning around their parents with joyous innocence. Diego's triumphant shout echoed, "Now we finally have a complete family." Isabella clapped her hands in delight, while Mateo hugged Alejandro's leg tightly. Their laughter filled the room like bells, warming even the coldest hearts among the guests. In the corner, Teresa watched, her face hardened like marble, yet beneath her fury, a flicker of doubt appeared. For the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong. What if love, the very thing she despised, was the only force that could save her son? Her silence isolated her more than ever. Alejandro lifted his head, his voice strong and clear. Today, I choose what I should have chosen long ago, my family. They are my strength, my truth, and I will never hide them again. Applause thundered, filling the hall, as if every hand in the room recognized the weight of his courage. Valentina's tears no longer carried fear or shame. They flowed with relief, with gratitude, with love. After years of sacrifice, she was no longer alone. Alejandro had chosen to stand beside her, not in secret, but before the world. Together, they could now share the burden that once crushed her shoulders alone. The triplets clung to their father, unwilling to release him, as though fearing it was all a dream. Alejandro bent down, kissed their foreheads, and promised, "I will never leave you again." His words were a vow etched in eternity, sealing the bond between father and children forever. Carmen smiled proudly, her heart swelling with peace. She knew her legacy would not be measured in money or estates, but in love reborn. The Mendoza family had been scarred by pride, but now it had a chance at healing. "Love has won," she whispered, her soul finally at rest. The guests, deeply moved, began to depart, carrying whispers of what they had witnessed. This was no scandal anymore. It was a story of redemption, sacrifice, and courage. They left knowing they had seen something rare, a man choosing love over reputation, and a family rising from the ashes of pride. Outside, the city lights glimmered like stars, celebrating silently. Alejandro, Valentina, and the children walked out hand in hand, leaving the Hall of Judgment behind. The future was uncertain, but together they would face it. For the first time in years, Alejandro felt free. Not as a CEO, but as a man. The narrator's voice lingered like a final embrace. Sometimes life takes what we love most, only to return it when we least expect it. What would you do if you discovered your true love had been waiting all along? The question hung in the air, stirring every soul who listened. As the images faded into a slow dissolve, the voice invited softly, "Leave your comment, share this story, and subscribe for the next tale that will touch your heart. Because here, every story is a reminder that true love always defeats pride." And with that, a new chapter began.